I think we've been spending a whole day looking at various aspects of bottom of the pyramid, and then n equal to 1, r equal to g, looking at the co-creation of personalized experiences. And of course, if you look at the individual books, they all look very different, and they are not connected in some fashion. So what I thought might be an interesting thing for us to do is to go back and ask a simple question. Philosophically, how do they all fit in together? What are the implications for us? I believe that the last century, we spent a lot of time trying to get countries to have political freedom. I believe it is still work in process, as all of us can recognize. But the idea of personal freedom, idea of political freedom, I think is getting well entrenched. Everybody may not have the freedoms, but everybody aspires to that. So you can ask a question, what is the next frontier for us as civilized society? What is it that we can do? I believe it is about democratizing commerce. That is the challenge for the next century. And you can ask, why do I come to that conclusion? Because a lot of people around the world are asking simple questions like, is globalization good or bad for the poor? What's our answer? Is it good or bad? It's a bad question. Because the reason I do this is how we ask the question begets the answer. If you ask, is it good or bad, what are you going to say? Some people are going to say it is good. Some people are going to say it's bad. That's not a very good way to go about it. Therefore, I prefer to ask the question differently. How to make globalization work for the benefit of all? That's a different question from is it good or bad? Because globalization, as I told a group in the afternoon, is like gravity. No point in denying gravity. But you can defy gravity and build a plane. Because if you want to build a plane, you must deeply understand gravity. If you want to make globalization benefit all, then we must deeply understand globalization and must deeply understand the human condition to make it work. Therefore, don't ask the question, is globalization good or bad? Even though I know several Nobel Prize winners keep asking that question. But then you say, if democratization of commerce is the goal, what are the principles? I believe the most fundamental principle is for us to believe that every person has the right to have access to the benefits of the global economy. Just like political freedom, we think is a birthright, we should say access to benefits of global economy should become a fundamental right. That means every person should be treated as a consumer, affordable but world-class product and services, that is the spirit of the bottom of the pyramid as a micro-consumer, and at the same time shape their own experiences or co-create their own experiences, that is the spirit of future of competition and the new age of innovation. As a consumer, I must have two rights. One, have the right to make up my own mind, have a choice, and the dignity that you give to your consumer, that must be common for 6 billion people around the world. Rich, poor, does not make a difference to me. That should be our goal. At the same time, every person should be treated as a micro-producer. Whether I work in a factory, whether I'm an independent entrepreneur on my own, whether I'm weaving baskets alone by myself in my hut, it makes no difference to me. They should have the right to be treated fairly and compensated fairly. Does that make sense? As micro-producers and micro-consumers, how do I get the benefits of globalization is the organizing idea. And therefore, if you look at my work, democratizing commerce has the inclusion of 4 billion underserved in the market economy as micro-consumers and micro-producers. and people keep asking me all the time, you want to look at poor as consumers, that's not good. I said, yes, I treat them as consumers because I respect them and give them the dignity of choice. But part of the book is also about how to treat them as micro-producers. So if you look at the Amul example I gave you of the dairy farm in India, they are subsistence farmers. I'm going to share with you another example where you can start looking at people as producers and give them fair rewards for their effort. So that is the bottom of the pyramid. On the other hand, how to change the balance of power between the consumer and the farm. That is the second piece, that is the future of competition and the new age of innovation. If you really think about what we are asking ourselves, is how to enable consumers not to be helpless in the face of a global company, but to have a voice and a share of voice, and co-creation is equalizing the power imbalance between the company and the consumer. It is dealing with the power equation. That essentially is what. So those are the two elements of it. So the paradox of rapid economic development, and this is true for all the emerging countries in this audience, is something interesting. Rapid economic development can move people out of abject poverty. Somebody raised the question about Millennium Developmental Goals. I think for sure China and India are likely to get close enough because of rapid economic development. We have moved more people out of abject poverty in the last 10 years than ever in human history. That's the good news. The bad news is tremendous increases in income inequality. So poverty goes down, income inequality goes up. Both happen at the same time. So if I look at the two big issues in either China or India, in India it is called inclusive growth, which is a polite way of saying we have too much income inequality. On the other hand, if you go to China, exactly the same problem. They call it harmonious society. Because political leaders on both sides fully appreciate the impact of income inequality that will have on the social structure of their societies. So the economists use the Gini coefficient as a measure of inequality of incomes. If you look at the United States, it's not a very equal society. And so look at China. They're at 22. The lower the number, the more uniformly distributed the incomes are. So 22 was or 0.22, which is more accurate way of saying it. But anyway, 22 was what it was. Now it is 47, probably going up to 50 in a very short period of time. But what is more interesting is, if you look at per capita income, which is quite important. If you look at what is happening in a country like India, the per capita income is not very high, but tremendous income disparities, low in Human Development Index, and high on Corruption Index. And so is China. A little bit better on Human Development Index, but Corruption Index, they're competing for the top job. China, India, Brazil all look alike. If I put Kenya and Uganda and all these places here, it'll look much worse. There is a huge lesson here. And the lesson is, if you want to democratize commerce, you have to pay attention to the rule of law. Fundamental. You cannot have high level of corruption. In fact, for those of you who are statistically oriented, I didn't want to bore you with all the numbers and statistics and regression, which I'm quite happy to do. I took regressions of looking at Human Development Index and corruption. What do you find? Corrupt countries do not develop their human resources. Rule number one. Is perfect correlation. 175 countries around the world. Then you look at corruption and per capita income. Corrupt countries are not rich.